Hello everybody and welcome to another Earthward devlog. There was way too much to cover in the first video, and I really want to talk about the new art style that I'm using and the new software that I've learned how to use to make my art and animations. So let's just jump right into it. Before I even started drawing my player, I immediately ran into a huge problem. For my game, I needed to have my items visually equip on the player, which meant I had to do one of two things. One, draw the animations normally and then manually get each coordinate of every frame to draw the held item on the player, or use a skeletal animation software to rig and animate my player and have equipped items follow bone animation data. Now, the second one is much easier to do and way less time consuming, but some people might argue that the first option might look a little bit better. But for me, I decided to use Spine, which is a 2D animation software. It lets you create bones and animate using keyframes. The reason why I chose it is because it's been integrated with my game engine, GameMaker, which gives me a lot of flexibility, and it seriously made animating and coding so much easier. This is because it allows you to create attachments and slots and change their positions, rotations, and all these other things in-game. Whenever I want to update the player's animations, all I have to do is save the file and import it into GameMaker. And I can do this for anything, not just the player. So, believe it or not, this is the first game I'm making where I'm actually using a set color palette. It not only saves me a lot of time, but it really brings all the visual elements together, especially when it comes to designing environments. There is a lot to think about when designing a world, especially when your game uses procedural generation, which I'll talk about in the next devlog. Since resource gathering is a core part of Earthward, I had to make sure it was fun. In my experience, it's a good idea to have a staple resource like trees or rocks, but that's just a starting point. You need to add more variation to make things more interesting. To solve this, I started adding some size variation alongside new resource styles. Large trees take longer to chop and have a cool falling animation. Bigger rock and mushroom variations are more rare, but they have a pretty good chance to drop double the resources. Things like crates and logs also spawn throughout the levels. The more randomness there is, the better. In this case at least. And of course, different areas will have different resources and variations to create a tangible sense of progression, and to keep things fresh of course. I have a lot of ideas, so now I just need some time to start to implement them. The grass tile set is fairly basic, but I've been experimenting with some different details, like little rocks in the dirt and flowers in the grass, which I think looks pretty cool. So you might have noticed this as well, but I've also added in some procedurally generated backgrounds that match with the foregrounds a little bit to create a sense that you're exploring a larger world that has more than just one layer to it. I even made it so that the background is blurred and parallaxes correctly with the foreground, and I also added some more details to that background, so things like unoutlined versions of the trees and flowers and rocks and all this other stuff, as well as having it be a little bit desaturated and darker than the foreground. So, water exists, therefore fishing should too. Fishing isn't a main mechanic, but it is a good way to get some quick food to restore your health. Depending on what area you're fishing in, you'll get a different loot table. All of the loot tables are completely RNG based. Randomness is super important when creating a good roguelike, because it means that the player might get a better run next time they play. And quick question for you guys, do you prefer the pixelated fishing line or this normal one? Comment down below what you think. I also added item containers, like furnaces and chests. I coded a simple tile placing system to make sure that tiles would snap to the grid and couldn't overlap each other. The furnace has 4 slots and 3 uses. The game doesn't tell you what you can and can't smelt, which means it's up to the player to experiment. I'm definitely going to add some secrets there. Chests spawn naturally throughout the world and have a chance to contain rare equipment or weapons, which adds even more RNG elements. I personally prefer having an organized inventory, which is why I decided to make chests containers, instead of just having the chest drop the items after getting whacked. Like every developer, I did some quality of life work and fixed a ton of bugs. I improved some environment and UI animations. I completely reworked the UI interface since the last devlog because it was way too similar to Magicite. I also added some more unique item slots, like enchantments and, yes, a grappling hook. You're welcome, comments. Whenever you hover over an item in your inventory or in an item container, you now get a nice tooltip appear below your little inventory box, which will display information like the durability, the damage, the type of damage that weapon does, whether or not it's consumable, whether or not it's a material or weapon, and other fun stuff like that. I changed and added a lot of item recipes, and literally wrote down like 100 ideas. I updated some of the sprites and added durability to tools, so the player actually has a reason to craft new ones. This also means that the player will need to spend resources to get resources. Certain tools are also now required to mine certain resources. For example, the wooden pickaxe can only mine copper, stone, and coal, while higher tier pickaxes can mine more powerful ores. I haven't added the next tiers yet, since I want to focus more on the core game mechanics first. And that about sums up what I've done this week. I really like the direction the game is going in, and I can see it slowly forming its own identity. If you want to play developer versions of Earthward or gain access to extra content, consider supporting my work over on Patreon, or joining the community Discord. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next Devlog.